So hi everyone, we are Post++. So Post++ is a social media moderator that checks posts including text and image and gives suggestions to to make sure it matches the platform community guidelines. And normally, human moderation is prone to personal bias and time consuming. So the goal of Post++ is to give an effective system to make it more respectful online environment. And this is the dataset looks like that we found it. The original dataset contains 150K of tweets, including text and image. And there are 3 independent annotators, and there are 80% of non-hate content, and 5 different categories of hate content. So after cleaning those, we select 26 tweets of them, and we give a balanced non-hate and hate data. And this is what the data format looks like down below. And the red blocks right here, it is how we manually labels it. And this is going to be used in our multi-model systems. Other than the data, we also web scrape the latest data on the platform. So we web scrape for accounts and extract the post data. And we filter out the data that does not contain image or lack of metadata. And we format the data and manually labels it at the red block below. And we make sure that it aligns with the data format as the previous slides mentioned. So before we load the data into our system, we still need a transformation to make the hate and non-hate to make the hate and non-hate binary values. And we use majority votings to calculate the average and means of it. If it is greater than 0.5, it is considered as hate contents. If it is not, it is considered as non-hate items. So let's move on the system architecture.
All right, so this is a system architecture. We use a web scraper to process real Twitter data into the MMHS 150K dataset. We use 3 OpenAI GPT-4o models here. And as you can see here, we have a visual questioning and answering, VQA model, which handles all the images, and the textual model, which handles all the text. Both of these moderators classify whether or not the tweets contents are compliant with community guidelines or not. And if they're not, they're then sent over to the editor, which attempts to revise this text into a way that is compliant. Everything else is then sent back, aggregated, and back to the user. So to evaluate our models, we use the text-only and image-only labels that we previously mentioned. Here are the confusion matrices that we have from here. There are very few false negatives, which is pretty good. But our textual moderator does have quite a few false positives, and we'll get to that later. The editor here was tested by sending the revised text back into the textual moderator to determine whether the revised text have been made compliant. As you can see here, we have around a 94% effectiveness on that. This is just one of the examples of the revision process. Here on the left, we have a derogatory term, sorry for the language. And on the right, we have the editor changing it into a more innocuous term with an explanation. Here's another example, this time with 3 terms. And this time, the editor manages to catch 2 of them. Unfortunately, it didn't manage to get the last one. Yeah. And this is an example of the full input and output to our system, the tweet, image, text. And on the left, we can see that this is, or on the right, we can see that this is a neutral tweet, and therefore the VQA model and the textual analysis has no problems with it. This is an example where we have a textual hate content, and as you can see, the VQA moderator has no problems, but the textual moderator and textual editor does revise this text. And here's an example of a multimodal hate tweet, and this time the VQA moderator has something to say, and again, its flag is non-compliant. So, about the false positives. One of the reasons why this is occurring is because insults are very nuanced, depending on the type of person you are, depending on who you are. Certain terms might be more hateful towards you than towards other people. And because of this, we see there is a clear disagreement here. Our model tends to be more susceptible to this, more sensitive, and therefore will tend to classify these things as non-compliant, even though they may lie somewhere in between. Now, we do run into a few limitations, and primarily that's because OpenAI enforces that all their models do not engage with derogatory terms or analyzing specific people. Here's just one of the examples where we send in this picture of, I believe that's Hillary, and then we get basically a nonsensical output at the end. And here's another example where we just don't get any output. And unfortunately, this is the exact scenario where what moderation is concerned about. We want to know these things, but now we just have to use other methods to get a sense of whether or not this contains hateful content. Now, moving forward, when we were testing our pipeline, we replaced all the models with GPT 3.5 models to save on API costs. Now, this raises a question as to whether or not those models will be equally as performant as the moderator classifiers. So that is an avenue for extension. Also, there is the OpenAI O1 model, which is highly performant for complex textual tasks. There's also the question as to whether or not that will be more effective for the editor textual generation as well. Furthermore, we only use 3 labels and 4 of us. So if we could crowdsource these labels to more people, we could probably get a less biased representation of all of these Twitter data. Thank you.